One of the things that I really was excited about when I found the resource that Keith and Henry had created on Liberating Structures is that, for many years we've had other kinds of active learning strategies that we've used, like brainstorming and, small group report outs. But I find that we get set on using those in sort of established ways. And what I really appreciated about the collection of the 33 activities that Keith and Henry have put together is that they actually take both us as facilitators and our learners to some extent out of our comfort zone. So that in many ways we would be open to new perspectives, new ways of relating to each other, new ideas. And I think that's one of the key benefits of using them. I wouldn't say that the Liberating Structures as individual activities are really new. I think what's really, really new about them is a way that Henry and Keith have pulled them together as a collection. And that there's a few reasons why I think that's really important. Number one is it gives you this repertoire, all in one place, either through their book or on their website, where you can look down the menu and when you're designing an activity or designing a new learning process, you can actually look down the menu and say, well, is this going to fit with the objectives that I have and the outcomes I have for that activity? And make some decisions as you're planning that activity. So I really appreciate the fact that they've pulled them together. The other thing I really appreciate about the resources that Henry and Keith have put together in the collection is that they've come up with some really clear, simple instructions on how you can use them in practice. From the use of what's called a structuring invitation, basically the question that you ask to prompt your learners or your participants to be able to engage in that activity. And I really appreciate how they put the emphasis on that, because I think for me that's where I've noticed where I've had in activities where I've had more success is when I've been clear in terms of that invitational question. Also, they try to keep the instructions as simple as possible, both from a facilitator's perspective as well as a participant's perspective. And I think that also makes it easier for people who aren't necessarily used to being engaged in that way, both as facilitators and our learners, participants, to be able to help them understand what are the key aspects of the process that they're going to be engaged in. And then, of course, they provide a list of tips and traps that I think are really, really helpful. But one of the other things that I think is more the philosophy of the Liberating Structures collection that I really have found to be attractive, and that is they've really positioned them as open educational resources. There's no intention from Henry and Keith that you have to implement the Liberating Structures exactly like they've laid it out. Of course, it's really important to keep to the importance of objective and outcome that you're trying to achieve and how the Liberating Structure fits with that. But I've used 16 of them in different teaching contexts over the last 2 years, and one of the things that I found is that in most of those cases I've altered the instructions a little bit, or I've altered the way that I've actually used them. Because I found that I needed to customize them for either the activity that I was using or the nature of the participants that I was working with. And so I like how they've set up the collection as basically take it, play with it, do your own sort of mashups with a variety of them, and make it work for you. So that leads into my next point, and that is I really like how they've introduced the concept of strings. So, I've had a chance to use Liberating Structures like activities for quite a while. I've been trying to integrate active learning strategies into my teaching for over 20 years. So I've experimented with a wide variety of different activities: fish bowls, graffiti walls, different kinds of alternatives to brainstorming. But what I appreciate about the way that Keith and Henry have brought these together in a collection is they've introduced the idea of strings. So basically, how can you take more than one of the Liberating Structures and sequence them together to achieve the learning outcomes that you want to achieve. And for me, that was a major aha, because I've always used these activities more in terms of as independent activities. So I've had a chance to experiment over the last year with using up to 4 activities in string. So basically having a whole morning of liberating structures. The most that I've used is 4, with a group of Brazilian university presidents. Jim Wellinga and I did a week-long session on university leadership and change. And so the last day I took them and pulled them together into a morning-long sort of opportunity to reflect and consolidate the learning that had happened over that week. And the time just flew by. The feedback from the participants was just that. It seemed like everything just moved really, really quickly. And I think that gave us good feedback in terms of the kinds of engagement that people appreciated, at least with that group.